And I want to begin with the Parsha, of course. There's a lot of action in this week's Parsha, a lot of exciting things. We've talked about them already, plagues and being called to leadership. And then kind of near the beginning, after the call and Moses' acquiescence and Aaron's participation, and before the plagues actually begin, before Moshe and Aaron go to Pharaoh and they do the trick with the staff and everything else, there's this kind of weird genealogy that shows up in chapter 6. And here is one verse from that genealogy. Vayikach Aharon et Elisheva bat Aminadav, achot Nachshon. Aaron took into his household as wife Elisheva, daughter of Aminadav, and sister of Nachshon, and bore him Nadav and Abihu, Eleazar and Itamar. Now, that wouldn't seem to be important, except that if you know anything about both the leadership of the tribes of Israel and also the Midrashic tradition having to do with this guy Nachshon ben Aminadav, you might think that's interesting. I didn't realize that Aaron was related to Aminadav and to Nachshon, right? Brothers-in-law, and that seems kind of interesting. So why is it that we might kind of make mention of his name here? Is there something more to the story? And maybe there is and maybe there isn't. But I do want to say a few words about this guy, Nachshon ben Aminadav, because I think his particular character and his leadership points us toward the topic that I want to consider with you a little bit this morning, and that is the topic of those who are refugees, those who are in prison, those who've been taken captive among our people, and the work toward their liberation. So, in Numbers, we also get a mention of Nachshon ben Aminadav. It says, the one who presented his offering on the first day was Nachshon, the son of Aminadav, of the tribe of Yehudah. And that might also seem not all that odd, because he is just one of each of these princes, these leaders of the different tribes that's mentioned in this section where they're dedicating the Mishkan in the wilderness, the tabernacle. Except that there's something that's a little different about Nachshon and the other heads of the tribe, and that's that in the other heads it actually mentions that they were the Nasi, they were the prince, they were the leader, and Nachshon, it doesn't say that, even though we know that he was. That's why he's offering the tribute. And so this is what one of the medieval commentators, Or HaChaim, says on that. So, Lamatei Yehudah, the tribe of Judah, the Torah omitted the word Nasi, prince, although this title is used in connection with all the other princes. When they're introduced as offering their respective gifts, the Torah also wanted us to know that Nachshon did not think of himself in terms of his title, his position, but considered himself as Mibnei Shevat, as one of the people, as a member of the tribe. So there's something about Nachshon, not only that he was kind of a venerated leader and maybe didn't need any introduction. I sort of feel like that at Beth Am sometimes, that this is a place filled with people with impressive titles who don't really need people to call them by those titles, and they kind of like coming to shul here because we go by first names and we're informal. And part of it was that he's due the respect that the other princes, the other Nisi'im get, except that he doesn't view himself in that way. He views himself as part of the people. Remember that, because I think it has something to do with not only his leadership, but also where does the agency lie, the responsibility lie for taking care of the rest of the people. Okay, so now we're going to Exodus chapter 14. And this is the moment that I really want to kind of focus on with regard to Nachshon. Because at the parting of the sea, right, the people have fled from slavery in Egypt, and they arrive in a couple of weeks in Parashat Beshalach to the banks of the Reed Sea, the Yam Suf. And as they're standing there, the Egyptian army is bearing down, and we know what's going to happen. God's going to part the sea, and the question is, how does that actually happen? Does that happen by God on behalf of the people? Is there something that the people need to do, or the leader has to do in that moment to make it happen? And so God says to Moshe, why do you cry out to me? Tell the Israelites to go forward. right? And you lift up your rod and hold out your arm over the sea and split it so that the Israelites may march into the sea on dry ground. So the implication is Moshe is obviously not the one who has the power to part the Yam Suf, but there is something about his needing to do something in that moment that enables God to bring about this miracle. And perhaps even more than that, it's not about Moshe, but it's also about the people. Tell the people to move forward toward the sea. Don't worry, when they get there, the sea's going to part. But I don't know about you, I've never seen a sea part. And I could imagine that even though these plagues happened in Egypt, perhaps the people are feeling a little reticent. I mean, the sea is kind of vast and scary, and the Egyptian army is vast and scary behind them. Maybe they don't want to move forward. So what does that moment look like when they actually get to the waters? And this is where Nachshon ben Aminadav comes in. So there's a couple of different sources that I want to look at here with regard to Nachshon. The first is from Bamidbar Rabbah, the Midrashic collection. Rabbi Yehuda ben Eli said, when Israel was at the sea, the tribes were arguing with each other. One tribe said, I will go down first into the sea. And the other tribe said, I will go down first. And what happened? Nachshon jumped first into the waves of the sea and went down. As David said, deliver me, O God, for the waters have reached my neck. And then, by implication, the sea then parted. So Nachshon is the one who jumps into the waters, and he does it because the tribes are vying for pole position. Each of them wants to be the first to demonstrate their faith to God. Does this sound a little unlikely to anybody? A little unbelievable? Really? I mean, this circumstance, all these tribes are like, I want to jump into the water, right? That doesn't seem, and in fact, some of the other rabbis found this a little implausible. So there's another tradition which probably is more familiar to us who know the Midrash that says exactly the opposite. This is from the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud, from Masechet Sota. Rabbi Yehuda said to Rabbi Meir, this is not how the incident took place. Okay? He's actually referring to another version of it that has to do with Benjamin, but it doesn't matter. What's important is the version that he's going to teach you. Okay? And how did it actually take place? Rather, this tribe said, I'm not going into the sea first. And that tribe said, I'm not going into the sea first. And then what happens? What's the moment of Nachshon's leadership? Nachshon, right, the prince of Yehudah, jumped into the sea, and that's what caused or enabled the waters to part, enabled God to bring about the miracle. Okay. So, I want to think about this midrash in a couple of different ways. One is with regard to the question of faith, right? About how God only creates miracles like parting seas when we're willing to take perhaps the ultimate risk by submersing ourselves in the water. And there is risk to bringing about miracles. And miracles exist in this world, and my guess is that when we think about the miracles that we've been affected by, they may not be as grand as seas parting, but that they did entail some level of risk, some level of faith on our part. And I also think that's an incomplete reading of the text. What seems to be at the heart of this teaching is actually a question of responsibility. What it asks is, who is accountable to the Hebrews who are enslaved in Mitzrayim? Who bears responsibility for freeing the Jewish captives? Is it God? Is it Moses? Is it the tribal leaders? Is it, we might consider in our year of Am here at Beth Am, the Jewish people themselves? So that's one. Who's responsible? And the second, though, is the teaching seems concerned with an additional question, and that is when. The question at the heart of the Midrash is about how difficult it is to go first, to act when others seem reticent to do so. So you'll notice that I'm wearing a piece of tape that says 99. The reason I'm wearing this piece of tape is because today is day 99 and tomorrow is day 100 since October 7th, and since the hostages were taken, well more than 200 hostages were taken prisoner to Gaza as part of a meticulously planned, deviously premeditated attack by Hamas against Israeli citizens. They are men and women and children and the elderly, infants. They're Jewish, but also Christian and Buddhist and Muslim. Some have been redeemed for a not insubstantial price. Some have been violated, deprived of basic human rights, or murdered in the months since. By some counts, if you're counting the living, including those who were taken before October 7th, and including whose remains are still there in Gaza, there are 136 hostages remaining in Gaza. And our tradition, I think, challenges us to think about our captives and to do what we can to liberate them. So I want to turn our attention now to the remaining sources on the page. And these sources are about Pidyon Shvuyim, the mitzvah of redeeming our captives. So I'm on source 7 now. Ephira Hormitz, the mother of King Shapur, king of Persia, sent a purse full of dinars to Rav Yosef. She said to him, let the money be used for a great mitzvah. And now the question is, what is a great mitzvah? She didn't say use it specifically for this mitzvah. She said, do it for a mitzvah rabbah, for something really important. And Rav Yosef sat and he considered, what is a great mitzvah? Abaye said to him, from what Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda taught, that one does not impose giving of tzedakah on orphans, even for the sake of redeeming the captives. Learn from this that redeeming the captives is a great mitzvah. Did everybody get the move? Basically, the implication is orphans, right, those who are disenfranchised and suffering themselves are even typically expected to give some tzedakah. But there's an exception to, right, so even in the case of redeeming captives, I'm doing that backwards. Poor people are typically required to give tzedakah, but there are also some exceptions to that. One of them may be orphans, and it says even though in the redeeming of captives, even then they shouldn't be forced to give tzedakah. And so by implication, what we're saying is that that redeeming captives, Pidyon Shvuyim, is a really important mitzvah. Okay? And how important is it? There's actually reams and reams of material about Pidyon Shvuyim. This is not one of these mitzvot where there are a couple of pages and a few, I had to be very selective in bringing you, there are discussions about how much you should pay to redeem captives and who should be involved, but just a little sampling of the tradition around the redeeming of captives in Judaism. So this is from Masechet Ketubot. It says, if she, his wife, was taken captive, he's obligated to ransom her. And if he said, here is her get and her ketubah, let her ransom herself, he is not permitted. Does that make sense? So let's say a man's wife was taken captive. Is he allowed to say, well, I'm going to divorce her and she can ransom herself? The answer is no. You have a responsibility. I mean, what a shlemiel. But you have a responsibility to this person that you've committed your life to, and you need to fight for them. Okay? And it's important to notice that this is kind of in contradistinction to the second piece of this little section, which was if she was injured, it's his duty to provide for her medical treatment. But what if he said, here's her get, here's her ketubah, I'm going to divorce her, I'm going to pay her the amount that I promised in the ketubah, and now let her heal herself. In that case, actually, he's permitted to do that. Okay, so again, what a schlub. But what's the difference here? Of course, the difference is that what she needs in the second circumstance is she needs resources to be able to pay for doctors and medications in order to be able to be healed. That doesn't necessarily have to come at the hands of her husband if the medical infrastructure is in place to be able to heal her. So maybe it's better for her, actually, if he's this kind of a guy, that she should heal herself. But either way, that's not the case when somebody has been taken captive. Because who knows whether the money is going to be able to get to the right people and whether actually this person is going to be liberated. Let's go to source 9. And these are just 3 quick sources from Shulchan Aruch, which is a 16th century code of Jewish law. That deals with the issue of Pidyon Shvuyim. ransoming captives comes before feeding or clothing the poor. There is no act of charity more meritorious than ransoming captives. Therefore, money collected for any worthy purpose whatsoever may be used as ransom, even if originally collected for the erection of a synagogue. And further, even if the building materials have already been bought and the beams squared, right? You've prepared the building materials, which makes it a grave offense to sell them for any other purpose, right? You'd have to essentially waste the materials that you've already bought. Better that you should use the funds in order to redeem captives. It's permitted to sell them to raise a ransom, even if you're going to be losing some money in the transaction. This is the next seif. This is the next section of the Shulchan Aruch. He who shuts his eyes against the ransoming of captives transgresses negative precepts. I'm not going to read through all of them, but if you count them, there's 4 negative commandments and 4 positive commandments. 4 thou shalt nots and 4 thou shalts that the Shulchan Aruch is going to claim are actually transgressed when one does not participate in the redeeming of captives. And finally, just to kind of put a fine point on this, every moment that one delays unnecessarily the ransoming of a captive, it is as if he were to shed blood. So this is where we're at, folks. We're at day 99, coming up on day 100. I'm wearing this piece of tape because Rachel Goldberg, who I had the honor of meeting when I was in Jerusalem at the end of October this year, just a couple of weeks after the massacre of October 7th, she's been doing this, and others have been following her lead of taking a piece of tape and writing the number of days that her son Hirsch, Poland, has been in captivity in Gaza. If you remember, he's the one who lost his arm and then was taken into captivity. And he's one of those well more than 100 who remain in captivity to this day. And so Rachel and her husband John asked publicly that we all consider doing what she's been doing, which is to have some sort of outward sign of our solidarity with those who have been imprisoned in Gaza. And so I wore this Shabbat 99 for the day. I do want to thank, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Senator Cardin's work as the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. I know that you have been very involved in working to redeem our hostages there in Gaza, and I appreciate that. And also, to my point earlier about leaders and the rest of us, it doesn't just fall to those who are elected officials, senators and presidents, to do this work. It falls to all of us. We need to advocate to our elected officials. There are 2 senators in this state. There are, of course, representatives in this state who interface with foreign governments, and we need to do more to hold them accountable and to push for the return of these hostages. Israeli citizens are pushing their own government to do this. There are some other things that we can be doing as well. We can be marking the days. We can be posting on social media images or stories, if we're called to do that, about those who are in captivity. We, of course, can be sending funds to those who are advocating for this. There are a couple of important organizations, the Bring Home the Hostages Now organization, for example, that's been doing important work to print posters and put out social media posts to raise awareness. You may have seen at The Hague this week where Dr. Tal Becker gave the opening remarks yesterday on behalf of the State of Israel. Tal is actually going to be here at Beth Am at the end of May, May 31st, that weekend, as a scholar in residence, Im Yirtzeh Hashem, unless he gets called away for some diplomatic emergency. I thought that Tal gave really extraordinary and powerful remarks at the Hague on behalf of the state and this libelous claim of genocide. Outside, you may have seen there was a protest where folks had posters of the hostages. So using these opportunities to raise awareness that these human beings didn't deserve to be taken. There's no mistake that Israel has made, and Israel has made many mistakes, that warrants the targeting and the abduction of civilians and even soldiers in the manner in which they were taken. And it's important that we raise awareness about that all the time. And so one final thing that I want to mention is that at Beth Am, we have been on our board outside, our new signage between this building and in front of our courtyard. Each week for many weeks now, we've been putting 3 posters up. And we've been rotating those posters through to raise awareness in this community and to our own congregants about those who've been taken hostage. One of the people that we thought was taken hostage and that we learned later had been killed on October 7th was, of course, Donna Kirschbaum's dear friend Vivian Silver, an amazing warrior for peace. And we've learned, and we've had to go through our stack of posters and take some of them out as we've learned that people were in fact killed, some of whom have been killed subsequently in Gaza, some of whom we learned through DNA evidence were killed on October 7th. But the 3 people who are on our board this week, I want to tell you who they are. Yagev Buchstav was kidnapped with his wife, Rimon Kirsch-Buchstav, from Kibbutz Nir Im. While his wife has been released, he still remains hostage. He loves cooking, he enjoys music, and he likes to work with animals. Naama Levi was kidnapped from Nahal Oz, the IDF base, on October 7th, where she had just been stationed a few days prior after her training. Naama participated in the Hands of Peace organization, a grassroots organization that brings together American, Israeli, and Palestinian youth for social action projects. She's described as a girl who believes in the good of all peoples. And finally, on our board this week, we have Eden Yerushalmi, who was taken captive from the Supernova music rave by Hamas terrorists after hiding for 3.5 hours. She's a bartender and always described by her sisters as the girl that everyone loves, always happy and always laughing. I asked about who needs to be involved. We all need to be involved. Our leaders need to be involved. The people need to be involved. I also asked about when. And in that regard, I want to draw attention to the famous statement of Hillel the Elder, who said, Imlo achshav imatai. If not now, when? Now is the moment. 99 days is 99 too many. Please, God, they should be brought home as quickly as possible, and we must continue to work and to speak until they are. At this time, I want to invite us, those who are able to stand as we sing these ancient words, praying for the liberation of our captives, the Achenu prayer. You can find it on the back of your programs, and please join Rav Tyler and myself. Achenu kol Beit Yisrael, Achenu kol Beit Yisrael, Anetuni v'tzara, v'tzara u'v'shivya, Omnim ben bayam u'ven bayam b'chashav. Achenu kol Beit Yisrael, Achenu kol Beit Yisrael, Anetuni b'tzara, b'tzara u'v'shivya, Haomnim ben bayam u'ven bayam b'chashav. Hamakol yirachem, yirachem alehem, v'yotzihem mitzara, v'yiracham me'afel aleora, v'shibud ligeula hashta, b'gala u'vizman karim. Ratzon. May this be God's will and our mission. Amen. Every word.